What's up, everybody? Welcome back to your favorite New York Jets subscription podcast, Badlands. I'm your host, Joe Caporoso. Joined, I think, number 4 or 5, Moe Moton, Bleacher Report back on. You might have the belt for most guest appearances. Thank you for coming back, Super Bowl week. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Well, I'm a local to the New York, New Jersey area, so it's only right, if I'm on multiple times. I will say my Patriots prediction of them finishing last in the AFC West was a year late, but it is what it is.
Listen, I count it. Anytime you're going to come on here and make negative predictions about the Patriots, this audience is going to be very happy to hear it. And I think that the last time we were on, we were talking about our friend Carr at quarterback. That didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
The Jets went the Aaron Rodgers route. Of course, that didn't work out in year one. Although I think if they got Carr, that would not have worked out year one either. It's not exactly didn't have exactly the best year in the world for the Saints, but that's neither here nor there. So we're going to talk about a certain receiver at the top, and then we're just going to riff on the AFC a little bit. Mm-hmm. There has been a lot of smoke about my New York Jets trying to acquire Davante Adams from the Raiders. I think they were strategically leaking stuff throughout the regular season to change the conversation about how bad they were playing, that they've reached out, they've been rebuffed. It feels like since the Raiders made the decision to bring Pierce back, most Jet fans, myself included, now feel like this is less likely to happen. Does that have an impact on anything? And then what do you think an actual compensation package would need to look like from the Jets' end to get this done, to get Davante here, as Aaron Rodgers is, of course, still the Jets' primary general manager at this point?
Well, you and the Jet fans have the right sentiment about this. With Antonio Pierce back, I think it is less likely that they traded Davante Adams before the season. Now, if things go sideways during the regular season, the Raiders start off very poorly, 0-6, 0-5, whatever the case may be, anything could happen, right? Before the trade deadline, we see teams sell off parts if they aren't going anywhere. But the locker room was firmly behind the hire and firmly behind Antonio Pierce getting the job. Max Crosby even floated the idea that everything's on the table, including a trade if the Raiders don't bring back Antonio Pierce. Davante Adams had a lot of the same thoughts. Not necessarily a trade, but we want Antonio Pierce back, or else you're going to have to convince us that this plan, whatever you're choosing, that's not Antonio Pierce, is the right plan to go at the head coaching position. So I wouldn't say talk should be dead at this point, but if DraftKings were to pull up a betting spread for me and say, would you bet on Davante Adams being traded to the Jets, yes or no, I would put a lot of money on saying no. Now, if let's say a trade does happen, what would a compensation package look like for Davante Adams? The Raiders traded 2 ones to get him and then paid him a new contract. So I would assume that even though he's up there in age, they're still going to push for at least 1 first-round pick. Simply because he still can play at a high level. He's still Davante Adams. He's still regarded as one of the top wide receivers in the league. Again, I know age may knock the value down a bit because how long is he going to play at an optimal level? But for what the Raiders gave up to get him, they're going to want to bring him to let him go, especially because he is still their go-to guy. If there's no Davante Adams, you're looking at Jacoby Myers as your number 1 wide receiver. And that's no disrespect to Myers, but he's a number 2 and not a number 1.
Yeah, and what makes this harder for the Jets is they're not going to obviously trade their first-round pick this year, a top 10 overall pick. They don't have a second-round pick. So you're talking about a 2025 first. And look, they are in such a win-now window with Rodgers' age. I don't know if I'd fully write them off proposing that at some point. I don't necessarily know if it's the smartest thing to do. But if the rest of the market doesn't look like it's breaking their way in free agency, because a lot of these guys – Evans, Pittman, T. Higgins, I think they're either going to stay put or be out of the Jets' price range of what they're willing to pay, which means are you okay maybe living with a Calvin Ridley or a Cortland Sutton if you could even get those guys? Or are you just going to be like, whatever, we don't care about the 2025 draft pick. We're going to flip it now. Doesn't matter what Adams' age is. He's going to be good enough with Garrett Wilson and Rodgers where it will be worth it. I wouldn't write off considering the desperation of the Jets situation, but it certainly feels more likely than not that Adams starts the season on the Raiders at least. And if it goes sideways and they can't figure out quarterback, maybe it's another thing that's looked at in the middle of the year. From a Jets perspective, knowing that they badly need pass catchers and badly need offensive linemen, before we talk about the broader AFC, anybody else on the Raiders roster you think that they could have interest in that will probably shake free as they head into the offseason?
This is probably not going to excite Jets fans a whole lot, but I think Jermaine Illuminar will be someone that the Jets can look at simply because number one, played a lot of right tackle with the Raiders. Number two, has a lot of position versatility, so he could play guard, he could play right tackle. So depending on what you guys do with AVT, you can mix in Jermaine Illuminar into that plan and figure out where he would fit on the offensive line. So now he's going to be a free agent, so the Jets wouldn't have to give up anything for him. But just as a player that's played with the Raiders who can translate over to New York and play for the Jets and fill one of their top needs, I think Jermaine Illuminar is a guy to look out for simply because of what I just talked about. And he's still 29 years old. He's not one of these older offensive linemen who's over the hill looking for one last deal. I think he still can play serviceable football at 29 years old. Actually had his best years with the Raiders. He had some penalty issues in his first year, but over time he's kind of fixed his technique, and he's been a lot cleaner on the offensive line.
The Jets sitting at 10. Everyone's assuming they're going to take a tackle. In terms of what tackles are going to be there, I think there's some hope and optimism that there's going to be multiple teams who trade up to try to get their hands on a quarterback. Raiders could be one of them. Raiders, Broncos, yep. Vikings. Do you think that, particularly with the lens to the AFC West teams, do you think that the Raiders and Denver could be teams who get up ahead of the Jets and take quarterbacks and thus pushing down a Fashanu or a Fuaga so they have their pick of a new tackle with number 10 overall? The Raiders going to be that aggressive to get a starting quarterback? I'm assuming they don't view O'Connell as that guy and more of a backup long term.
Believe it or not, there are some fans who think O'Connell could be that guy, but I don't see it. There are already rumors that the Raiders are connected to Jayden Daniels. Of course, that would be moving up to number 3, a top 3 spot. But when you talk about, let's say, that 8 to 10 range, and I've been trying to float this idea to Raider fans, and they've pushed back a little. Some of them have pushed back on this idea, but I think Bo Nix is going to go a lot earlier than people think. Bo Nix has the tag as being a game manager, doesn't throw the ball downfield, but I think the Raiders' offense with Luke Getsy coming there, short passes, some West Coast influence from playing under, coaching under Mike McCarthy, and then being with Matt LaFleur, I think that the Raiders would be interested in a Bo Nix, even if they have to move up for him. And a lot of fans, again, a lot of Raider fans will hear this say, no way we're trading up for a Bo Nix. But I will say the one position that gets overdrafted every year is the quarterback position. If you don't have your quarterback, you're going to be aggressive to get one, especially if you feel like he could be your guy for the next decade or so. So I think when it comes to that 7 to 10 range, I think the Raiders would be interested in moving up. I definitely think the Denver Broncos as well. You look at the division, Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. Now you got Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert in Los Angeles. The Denver Broncos and Raiders should be aggressive in getting their quarterback, whomever that may be, whether it's Bo Nix, maybe it's J.J. McCarthy. But I think both teams would be interested in moving up, depending on what the package looks like.